I died that day. You can die too, for all I care.
Oh! As you wish.
The Princess Bride looks like a clean fairy tale on the surface, but behind the camera, it was anything but simple. What seems like a smooth blend of romance, sword fights, and comedy was actually built on strange accidents, risky decisions, and moments that almost broke the illusion completely. And yet somehow, it all came together. Across 20 behind-the-scenes facts, the film reveals a production full of surprises, hidden struggles, and unbelievable moments that shaped what ended up on screen. One detail in particular hides in plain sight and quietly changes how you see the entire story. Number 20. The rat suit performer went missing. Nobody expected one of the strangest behind-the-scenes stories from The Princess Bride to involve a man inside a giant rat costume quietly vanishing between takes. The production already felt chaotic during the fire swamp scenes. Heavy suits trapped heat, visibility was terrible, and performers needed frequent breaks just to breathe normally. But the crew noticed something even stranger. Anton Toto Cayley, one of the stunt performers playing the terrifying rodents of unusual size, kept disappearing without warning. At first, everyone assumed he was simply resting somewhere off stage after crawling around under layers of fur and rubber for hours. Then people realized nobody could actually find him for long stretches of time. The truth sounded like something invented for the movie itself. Cayley had reportedly been avoiding unpaid parking fines in London and decided the safest place to stay hidden was near the production's massive soundstage. While actors rehearsed sword fights and dramatic speeches, crew members occasionally wandered through the set, searching for the missing rat performer. Despite the confusion, Cayley still delivered the physical scenes perfectly, throwing himself into tackles, lunges, and chaotic swamp action. Somehow, the production managed to survive while temporarily losing an actual human rat between scenes. Years later, the bizarre story remained one of the funniest memories connected to the film, proving that even background performers could accidentally become unforgettable legends. Number 19. A challenging kiss scene. For a movie filled with sword fights, giant rats, and dangerous cliffs, one of the hardest scenes to capture in The Princess Bride was simply a kiss. The final moment between Westley and Buttercup looked soft, effortless, and completely natural on screen, but filming it required far more precision than audiences ever realized. Director Rob Reiner wanted the ending to feel timeless, like the final page of a perfect fairy tale. That pressure turned one brief romantic moment into a carefully repeated performance that demanded patience from everyone involved. Cary Elwes and Robin Wright filmed the famous kiss 6 separate times before Reiner finally felt he had the exact emotional tone he wanted. The challenge was not technical lighting, elaborate camera tricks, or complicated choreography. Everything depended on expression, timing, and chemistry. Every movement needed to feel sincere without becoming exaggerated or artificial. The actors reset themselves again and again, quietly refining tiny details between takes until the scene carried the warmth and emotional payoff the story needed. By the time cameras stopped rolling, the cast and crew understood they had captured something unforgettable. Decades later, audiences still remember that final kiss as one of the most iconic endings in fantasy film history. It completed the film's romantic fairy tale atmosphere. Number 18. An accident on set filming. The Princess Bride already demanded long days, physical stunts, and endless rehearsals, but Cary Elwes accidentally made things much worse with one reckless decision. During a break in production, Andre the Giant offered him a ride on his ATV around the set. It sounded harmless at first. One quick lap, a little fun, then back to work. Instead, the ride turned painful almost immediately. The vehicle reportedly hit rough ground, Elwes lost control of his footing, and he injured his toe badly enough to hear the bone crack. Suddenly, the movie's charming leading man could barely walk normally. The timing could not have been worse. Major scenes still needed filming, including portions of the famous sword fight with Mandy Patinkin. Elwes worried that openly struggling with the injury might slow production or create serious problems for the schedule. Rather than stopping completely, he pushed forward through the pain while quietly adjusting his movements whenever cameras rolled. That slightly stiff walk audiences notice in some scenes was not acting at all. It was an injured actor doing everything possible to hide the damage. Rob Reiner eventually rearranged parts of the shooting schedule to help Elwes recover before the duel scenes. Even then, he still performed demanding sequences while hurt, relying heavily on determination, adrenaline, and stubborn commitment daily. Number 17. Legendary Tales Off Camera. By the time The Princess Bride entered production, Andre the Giant was already living with constant physical pain. Years of professional wrestling had battered his massive frame, while acromegaly continued placing enormous strain on his body. Even simple movement could be exhausting. Cast and crew members later recalled that ordinary pain medication barely affected him because of his extraordinary size. What might help an average person did almost nothing for Andre. Over time, stories about the unusual ways he managed that pain became legendary across the set. According to several people involved with the film, Andre often turned to alcohol for relief. Not ordinary drinking either. Crew members described enormous quantities that sounded almost impossible to believe. One frequently repeated story claimed he consumed massive custom cocktails mixed in pitchers instead of glasses. What stunned people most was not the amount itself, but how little visible effect it seemed to have on him afterward. While others would have collapsed, Andre reportedly remained calm, conversational, and surprisingly steady. The stories grew even larger after filming ended. Hotel staff allegedly remembered towering bar tabs connected to his room alone. Co-stars later described watching him drink amounts that sounded completely unreal without appearing seriously intoxicated. Whether every detail became exaggerated over time or not, one thing remained clear. Andre the Giant existed on a scale that ordinary people simply could not fully comprehend at all. Number 16. A book within a book. Long before audiences discovered the Princess Bride movie, readers were already being tricked by one of the cleverest literary jokes ever attached to a fantasy novel. William Goldman did not simply write a fairy tale adventure. He wrapped the entire story inside an elaborate fake history designed to confuse readers in the most entertaining way possible. According to Goldman's introduction, the novel was supposedly an abridged version of a much older book written by a fictional author named S. Morgenstern. Goldman claimed the original version was painfully boring, overloaded with political history, endless descriptions, and tedious passages he had heroically removed for modern audiences. None of it was real. S. Morgenstern never existed. The original book never existed either. Goldman invented everything, then committed to the joke with astonishing detail. The novel included fake editorial notes, imaginary legal disputes, invented family stories, and lengthy interruptions where Goldman complained about material he supposedly cut from the text. Some readers genuinely believed they were reading a shortened version of a forgotten classic and spent years trying to locate the non-existent original edition. The prank became even stranger when Goldman teased a sequel called Buttercup's Baby, while pretending legal issues prevented its release. Readers debated whether the sequel existed for years. Somehow, the entire ridiculous setup only made the romance, adventure, and humor feel even more magical afterward. Number 15. How home video turned the tide. When The Princess Bride arrived in theaters during 1987, the reaction was surprisingly quiet. Critics generally liked it. Audiences who discovered it usually loved it. Yet the box office numbers never exploded the way studios hoped. Marketing became part of the problem. Some advertisements sold the movie like a children's fantasy, while others leaned heavily into romance or comedy. Nobody seemed completely certain how to explain a film that mixed sword fights, fairy tale adventure, sarcasm, romance, and absurd humor into one strange package. As a result, many moviegoers simply overlooked it. Everything changed once the film reached VHS. Families rented it for weekend movie nights, kids watched it repeatedly after school, and college students memorized entire conversations from the script. Quotable lines spread everywhere. Suddenly, people who had missed the theatrical release were discovering the movie at home and recommending it to friends non-stop. Unlike massive blockbuster films pushed by expensive marketing campaigns, The Princess Bride grew almost entirely through word of mouth. By the early 90s, worn-out VHS tapes could be found in living rooms across America. The movie transformed from a modest theatrical performer into a beloved cultural phenomenon that audiences passed down between generations. Number 14. A director's uphill battle. For years, The Princess Bride carried a reputation that terrified movie studios. Executives loved the screenplay, laughed at the dialogue, and admired the originality, but nobody could agree on what kind of film it was supposed to be. Was it a fantasy adventure for children? A romance for adults? A comedy filled with satire? A swashbuckling action story? The script somehow blended all of those elements together at once, which made studios nervous. Hollywood preferred simple marketing categories, and The Princess Bride refused to stay inside any of them. The project drifted through development for years, while producers struggled to figure out how audiences would react. Some worried the humor was too strange. Others believed the fairy tale elements were too sincere for modern viewers. Several people reportedly wanted major changes that would have stripped away the story's unusual personality entirely. At one point, William Goldman became so frustrated with the uncertainty surrounding the adaptation that he bought back the rights himself. Then, Rob Reiner entered the picture and made the decision that finally saved the film. Instead of simplifying the story, he embraced every strange part of it. He kept the romance, the comedy, the sword fights, and even the grandfather reading to his sick grandson. That unusual combination became the movie's greatest strength. Number 13. A dangerous filming location. The towering cliffs of insanity in The Princess Bride looked so dramatic that many viewers assumed they had been created with studio tricks or painted backdrops. They were not. The production filmed those scenes at the real cliffs of Moher along Ireland's western coastline, a location already famous for violent winds, steep drops, and breathtaking views. Once cameras started rolling, the cast and crew quickly realized the environment was every bit as dangerous as it appeared on screen. At their highest points, the cliffs rise hundreds of feet above the crashing Atlantic Ocean below. Strong wind gusts regularly sweep across the edges, with enough force to throw loose debris back upward. Standing near the drop itself required constant caution, especially while carrying equipment or preparing stunt work. The weather also changed rapidly, sometimes turning calm scenes into chaotic conditions within minutes. Everyone involved understood that one careless mistake could lead to serious disaster. Rob Reiner could have recreated the location safely inside a studio, but he wanted the movie to feel authentic. That decision gave the scenes a weight and realism impossible to fake convincingly during the 80s. The cliffs feel dangerous because they actually were dangerous. Every wide shot carries a sense of genuine scale and risk that still impresses audiences decades later. Proving that real locations often create cinematic magic no artificial set can completely duplicate. Number 12. Music rights drama. One of the strangest Easter eggs hidden inside The Princess Bride began with what sounded like a joke between friends. Director Rob Reiner wanted musician Mark Knopfler to compose the film's soundtrack after hearing his atmospheric guitar work. Knopfler agreed, but he supposedly added one unusual condition before officially signing on. Somewhere inside the movie, he wanted a subtle visual reference to This Is Spinal Tap, Reiner's famous mockumentary about a fictional rock band. It did not need attention drawn toward it. It simply needed to exist quietly in the background. Reiner decided to follow through with the request completely. During the framing scenes involving the grandson's bedroom, a hat referencing Spinal Tap appears hanging in the room. Most viewers never noticed it because the object only appears briefly on screen, tucked behind the main action without fanfare. Dedicated fans later discovered the hidden reference after repeated VHS viewings and frame-by-frame rewatches. The funniest part is that Knopfler reportedly never expected Reiner to take the request seriously. What began as a casual joke evolved into one of the movie's most obscure behind-the-scenes details. Production designers even recreated the hat carefully after the original prop from This Is Spinal Tap could not be located anymore. The result became a tiny visual secret connecting two completely different films through pure backstage humor and stubborn creative commitment from everyone involved. Number 11. Surprising. Strength limits audiences. Watching The Princess Bride saw Andre the Giant tossing people around effortlessly and carrying characters like they weighed absolutely nothing. On screen, he looked unstoppable, a towering mountain of strength capable of overpowering anyone in his path. Behind the scenes, however, the reality was far more painful. Years of professional wrestling had severely damaged Andre's body long before filming began. His massive size, caused by acromegaly, placed enormous pressure on his joints and spine every single day. By the time production started, lifting another adult person safely had become nearly impossible for him. The filmmakers quickly realized they needed creative solutions to protect both Andre and the cast. Instead of having him physically carry co-stars repeatedly, the crew built hidden platforms, concealed supports, and carefully positioned camera angles that created the illusion of tremendous strength. Cary Elwes and Robin Wright often stood on raised structures, while Andre simply placed his arms around them naturally. From the audience perspective, it appeared completely convincing. What makes the situation even more touching is how quietly Andre handled his condition throughout filming. Cast members later described him as gentle, patient, and remarkably kind, despite being in constant pain. He rarely complained, even during physically exhausting scenes. The production essentially worked around his injuries without destroying the magic of the character. But behind the illusion stood an entire crew helping their beloved giant survive production safely together. Number 10. A hit scene gone too far. Some movie injuries happen during dangerous stunts, explosive action scenes, or complicated fight choreography. Cary Elwes managed to get knocked unconscious during what was supposed to be one quick and simple moment. The scene involved Count Rugen striking Wesley on the head with the hilt of a sword. It looked straightforward on paper. A controlled swing, a carefully timed reaction, then Wesley collapses dramatically onto the ground. Unfortunately, the situation became far more realistic than anyone expected once cameras started rolling. According to stories from the production, Elwes suggested that Christopher Guest lightly tap him for authenticity instead of pretending to make contact. The idea sounded harmless enough at first. Guest agreed, but when the moment arrived, the force of the hit ended up much stronger than intended. The sword hilt connected hard enough to knock Elwes unconscious for real. His collapse was not acting. The leading man genuinely blacked out in front of the stunned cast and crew. For several tense seconds, the set reportedly fell silent, while everyone waited to see whether he would wake up. Eventually, Elwes recovered, though the moment deeply rattled people nearby. Rob Reiner later kept the take because the reaction looked completely authentic on screen. Ironically, One of the movie's most believable moments existed because the actor playing Westley accidentally suffered an actual knockout while trying to make the scene feel more convincing for audiences everywhere. Number 9. A duel with real skills. The sword fight between Inigo Montoya and the Man in Black remains one of the most beloved duels ever filmed because it feels fast, elegant, and strangely authentic. Unlike many action movies that rely heavily on stunt doubles and frantic editing, The Princess Bride demanded genuine skill from its actors. Cary Elwes and Mandy Patinkin performed nearly all of the fencing themselves, turning the famous cliffside battle into a showcase of real training, timing, and athletic precision instead of camera trickery. Before filming began, both actors spent months practicing under legendary swordmasters Bob Anderson and Peter Diamond. These choreographers had already worked on major productions, including the Star Wars films, and treated the duel with remarkable seriousness. Elwes and Patinkin trained for hours every day, learning advanced movements, footwork, and blade control until the choreography became second nature. They even practiced fencing with both hands because the scene required the famous reveal that neither fighter was actually left-handed. What truly separates the duel from ordinary movie sword fights is the rhythm. Every parry, spin, and exchange flows naturally because the actors genuinely understood the techniques behind the choreography. Historical references to real fencing masters added another layer of authenticity. Number 8. A last-minute casting gamble. Wallace Shawn may have delivered one of the most memorable performances in The Princess Bride, but behind the scenes, he spent much of filming convinced disaster was waiting around the corner. The role of Vizzini, the endlessly arrogant criminal mastermind shouting "inconceivable" at everyone nearby, had reportedly been considered for Danny DeVito before Shawn entered the picture. Knowing another actor had originally been connected to the role filled Shawn with constant anxiety from the moment production began. Instead of feeling confident after being cast, Shawn reportedly worried that Rob Reiner would suddenly decide he had made the wrong choice. Every day on set felt temporary to him. He feared someone would eventually walk over, thank him politely for his effort, and announce that another actor was replacing him immediately. That nervous energy stayed with him through rehearsals, filming, and nearly every scene he performed. Ironically, the very insecurity making Shawn miserable ended up helping create the perfect version of Vizzini. His frantic delivery, twitchy confidence, and desperate attempts to appear intellectually superior suddenly fit the character beautifully. The nervous tension audiences feel underneath Vizzini's arrogance came from Shawn genuinely stressing himself out during production. What looked like brilliant comedic acting was partly real panic leaking into the performance naturally. Decades later, Vizzini remains unforgettable precisely because Shawn played him with such unstable energy, transforming personal fear into one of the funniest villains in fantasy movie history forever. Number 7. Comedy that hurt. Billy Crystal only spent a short amount of time filming The Princess Bride, yet his scenes became some of the most chaotic moments the production ever experienced. Cast as the eccentric Miracle Max, Crystal approached the role with non-stop improvisation and unpredictable energy. Instead of repeating the same dialogue exactly each take, he constantly invented new jokes, accents, pauses, and strange little reactions while cameras rolled. The result was hilarious for audiences later, but absolutely dangerous for anyone trying to stay serious during filming. Rob Reiner reportedly struggled the most. As director, he needed to monitor scenes carefully, but Crystal kept making him laugh hard enough to ruin takes repeatedly. Eventually, Reiner had to remove himself from the room entirely and watch filming through a monitor somewhere else, just to maintain control over production. Even then, containing laughter became nearly impossible. Cary Elwes faced a different challenge. During the Miracle Max scenes, Westley was supposed to remain mostly dead, motionless, and silent while Crystal performed around him. Unfortunately, Elwes kept breaking character from laughter. In some shots, the production reportedly swapped him with a dummy because he physically could not stay still. Number 6. A blooper for the ages. Every legendary movie eventually gathers at least one ridiculous behind-the-scenes story, but The Princess Bride might have reached a peak with a moment nobody on set could ever forget. During rehearsal for one of the castle scenes, the cast and crew were quietly getting ready for another routine run-through. Cameras rolled kind of casually, while actors stood in place waiting for dialogue prompts. It all felt smooth, professional, and honestly, completely normal, right up until Andre the Giant accidentally created what several witnesses later described as the loudest fart they'd ever heard in their lives. The account goes that the sound came out with such force that it physically rattled the plywood set under everyone's feet. Crew members just froze in stunned silence, while the noise dragged on far longer than anyone had assumed possible. One person reportedly timed it after the fact and said it lasted 16 whole seconds. Even more odd, the witnesses described it as shifting in rhythm and intensity during the whole thing, almost like some weird little musical performance happening across the room. For a few moments, nobody laughed because people were simply too stunned to respond. Then the tension finally snapped and the set basically went sideways. Andre, according to the tale, stayed calm and amused the whole time, smiling peacefully while everybody else tried to recover. Number 5? The studio wanted a bigger star than Cary Elwes. Before The Princess Bride became a beloved classic, it faced a major casting struggle that nearly changed its entire identity. Studio executives were not convinced that Cary Elwes could carry the role of Westley. At the time, he was still relatively unknown in Hollywood, with only a few supporting roles to his name. For a fantasy adventure film blending romance, comedy, and action, they wanted a recognizable leading man, someone with proven box office power and established star status. Several more famous actors were reportedly considered during early discussions, and the studio pushed for a safer choice. From their perspective, the film already mixed too many genres, and adding an untested lead seemed like an unnecessary risk. They worried audiences would not connect with a hero they had never seen before. Rob Reiner, however, strongly disagreed. After meeting Cary Elwes and watching his screen tests, Reiner saw something the executives missed. Elwes had effortless charm, sharp comedic timing, and a natural romantic presence that perfectly matched the tone of Westley. Even more importantly, his chemistry with Robin Wright felt immediate and believable, something no bigger star could guarantee. Number 4. Robin Wright nearly lost the role of Buttercup. Robin Wright's casting as Buttercup in The Princess Bride almost did not happen, despite the role eventually becoming one of her most iconic performances. At the time of auditions, she was still a relatively unknown actress with limited screen experience. The role of Buttercup, however, required someone who could embody innocence, emotional depth, and fairy tale beauty, while also holding her own in a story filled with comedy, adventure, and larger-than-life characters. Studio executives reportedly had doubts about whether Wright had enough presence to anchor such a major film. They worried that a lesser-known actress might not be able to carry the emotional weight of a central romantic lead. Some discussions even suggested considering more established performers who already had stronger recognition in Hollywood. The pressure to choose a safer, more familiar face was very real during casting decisions. However, Rob Reiner saw something different during Wright's audition. Her performance carried a quiet sincerity that felt natural rather than forced. She brought an almost storybook quality to Buttercup, blending vulnerability with strength in a way that fit the character perfectly. Her chemistry with Cary Elwes also helped solidify the pairing, making their connection believable from the very beginning. Number 3. A special hotel arrangements everywhere. Traveling for The Princess Bride was never simple for Andre the Giant. While most of the cast checked into standard hotel rooms, Andre's situation required constant adjustments everywhere the production went. His enormous height and weight made ordinary furniture unusable, and even basic door frames and bathroom layouts often created problems. What was routine accommodation for everyone else had to be completely reimagined for him. Hotel rooms were frequently modified before his arrival. Standard beds were too short and too fragile, so staff sometimes had to combine mattresses or arrange custom sleeping setups to support his frame. Bathrooms were another challenge, with fixtures and spacing that simply were not designed for someone of his size. Even moving through hallways required careful navigation in older buildings with narrow corridors. The production crew eventually developed a system to handle these challenges quickly. Wherever filming took them, advanced teams would prepare rooms specifically suited for Andre's needs, ensuring he could rest comfortably between long shooting days. Despite the inconvenience, Andre rarely complained. Instead, he remained patient and cooperative, often treating the logistical issues with humor. Number 2. Line that became a cultural catchphrase. Few lines in fantasy cinema have really landed with the emotional weight and this cultural aftertaste of "as you wish" from The Princess Bride. At first it seems basic, almost every day, like some polite thing you say back to a request. No big deal. But inside the movie, it sort of grows a deeper meaning that changes it into something way more intense and, well, hard to forget. Every time Wesley says, "as you wish," it is secretly saying, "I want you, Buttercup," like real devotion hidden inside a normal-sounding answer you know. After The Princess Bride came out, people latched on pretty fast. The line slipped past the screen and became a little shorthand for loyalty and tender affection, and that honest kind of sincerity. Couples started tossing it into regular talk, sometimes as a private code, for love that felt light but also oddly real. The phrase stuck because it was easy to recall, yet still had those layers, enough to feel like it belonged to the two people saying it. Decades later, it remains one of the most quoted and beloved moments from The Princess Bride. Number 1. Emotion. During Inigo's revenge scene. During Inigo Montoya's face-off with Count Rugen, Mandy Patinkin did this super emotionally charged performance in The Princess Bride. He later said, basically, he was not only playing the role in that moment, you know. Instead, he pulled from his own personal grief and sort of linked Inigo's need for revenge to the actual hurt of losing his father. That real emotional truth added weight to each word he said, especially the iconic line that really sums up the character. "You killed my father. Prepare to die." Turned into way more than dialogue, it became like a release for sorrow and rage that felt earned. Patinkin's acting made the duel feel raw, honest, and honestly kinda impossible to forget, even now. And years later, audiences still bring up that scene not only because of the choreography, but because of the depth underneath it. That decision to put real loss into fiction is what made Inigo Montoya one of the most powerful revenge characters ever in film history, and that's the hidden chaos behind The Princess Bride. Proof that even the most timeless films are built on unpredictable moments, risky calls, and stories most viewers never see. If you enjoyed these 20 behind-the-scenes facts, hit the like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe for more deep dives into classic films. Don't forget to check out the next video on screen for more surprising stories you won't expect.